One of the most prominent questions in the Naruto fandom is who would have won the Chunin exams in part 1 if it wasn't interrupted. These exams are biannual joint exams held by the hidden villages to decide which of the genin get promoted to Chunin. The exams are normally split into 3 stages: the written exam, the practical exam, and then the 1v1 versus battle at the end. However, winning the exams doesn't mean you become a Chunin, as that's decided based on your leadership skills, of which is relevant in this case since we're talking about who would have won the exams, not who would have been promoted. We're going to focus on the participants that made it to the 3rd stage of the event per the matchups provided by the proctor. We will then decide who wins each matchup using feats and statements, then have them move on to the next level to take on their next opponent. I'll be going from left to right as they did in the exams, which means that we're going to start with Naruto versus Neji. Now, using the feats from the battle itself, we see that Neji is faster than base Naruto. That much is undeniable. Naruto isn't able to land a hit until he tricks Neji using his shadow clones, only for Neji to block it using rotation at the last minute. What this shows is that Neji's ability to block or repel attacks using his chakra is faster than his actual bodily movements. What this also shows is that Naruto and his clones are able to bypass Neji's all-seeing eye that allows him to see almost a full 360 degrees per 10-10 statements by using pure speed. This is of course proven by Neji being surprised by the attack and being forced to use rotation as a last-ditch effort to block it. Now, Tenten also said that Neji's rotation ability is an absolute defense that's even more powerful than Gaara's, but that statement is made from ignorance since Tenten has no idea how strong Gaara's defense is or was. So this statement can't be used to confidently scale Neji's rotation above Gaara's defense. Now, there is an actual argument to be made that Neji's defense is actually better than Gaara's, but we'll get to that part later on. Now, a Naruto amped by the Nine Tails, which Naruto says is even stronger than he was during training, the same training in which Naruto summoned Gamabunta, which means that this Naruto could have summoned Gamabunta against Neji but decided not to. And before you say that Naruto wasn't planning on using Gamabunta in the Chunin exams, earlier on before the exams began, Naruto said that he wasn't worried about those guys because he can now summon a frog, which of course is referred to Gamabunta. This of course clearly implies that Naruto was planning on using Gamabunta, but only as a last resort as seen later on in the arc. Now, as it relates to speed, which is really what is on display here, Naruto and Neji seem to be at similar levels of speed since they were able to react to and dodge each other's attacks. Well, at least until the point where Naruto almost speed blitzed Neji, as seen by Neji saying no, rotation, at the very last minute, which is what he used to block the attack of Naruto. This once again proves that his ability activation speed is way greater than his actual movement speed. Now, strength-wise, the class sent them both flying, but for different reasons. Neji's rotation, as explained by Tenten, blocks and repels his opponent's chakra, which means that Naruto wasn't blown away by the rotation itself, he also tanked the force of his own attack. I say tanked because Naruto quickly recovered, created a shadow clone to trick Neji, then dug a hole under the ground using his bare hands so that he could land a surprise uppercut on Neji that disabled him permanently. Another thing to note is that even though Neji's rotation blocks attacks and reflects chakra, Naruto is still able to bypass it since Neji was visibly damaged after they collided. So in essence, Naruto is able to breach Neji's absolute defense. What this means is that Naruto is already above Neji in speed, strength, and durability by the end of this fight. Additionally, we have this databook statement saying that this is the moment the dead last Naruto surpassed the genius, so that pretty much confirms it. Now, while Naruto's scaling so far has been pretty much straightforward, Sasuke on the other hand is a little more complicated but doable. In this section, we're gonna include Rock Lee as not a participant but more so a guide for Sasuke's scaling. Now, as you know, Sasuke and Lee both fought Gaara at different points in the Chunin exams. Some would argue that Sasuke fought a stronger Gaara, which was never explicitly stated to be the case. This entire thing came from Gaara saying that the bitter crimson tears flow from lifeless eyes and mingle with the endless sands, bestowing ever greater power upon the demon god, which power scalers took to mean that Gaara's sand gets stronger every time he kills. Now, the more likely case is that Gaara was referring to Shukaku since he said it bestowed power upon the demon god. However, the sand that protects Gaara isn't the demon god but Gaara's mother spirit that somehow latched onto him when she died, as revealed later on in Shippuden. The key thing to note is that his mother's will isn't tied to a specific sand, as in the sand that's in his ground. Her spirit is within Gaara himself and will manipulate any sand in the area to protect Gaara, as seen when he was a kid, which is before he got the ground. I know that some are under the impression that it was Shukaku that was protecting Gaara, but that can't be the case since Gaara's sand does the same thing post losing Shukaku. And I mean, it was literally confirmed by Gaara's father that it was his mother's will later on in Shippuden. As well, it's to say that there's zero mechanic by which Gaara's sand, which is his mother's will to protect him, would get stronger by killing. Gaara's sand is just sand, which is sometimes amplified by his own chakra. It doesn't absorb chakra to get stronger, so by no mechanic should it be getting stronger by killing. In fact, the only established way for Gaara's sand to get stronger is by mixing the sand with other materials from the earth, such as iron sand or gold sand. As for Shukaku, which is the One Tails, there isn't any mechanic by which a Biju gets stronger by killing, but it was somewhat implied by the A-Tails that Kurama's strength or current power was somewhat amplified by his hatred for humans. So one could apply this to the One Tails as well, because he taunted Gaara when he was a kid. He was the voice inside his head telling him to kill. That is because Shukaku found joy in killing, as seen when he fully possessed Gaara versus Naruto. We even see Gaara talking to Shukaku in the fight versus Sasuke, saying that he's sorry he fed him bad tasting blood earlier, which is referring to the two guys he killed before the start of the fight. He then says that he's sure Sasuke will be tasty, and that's not due to power, it's due to the hatred he sees in Sasuke's eyes. He also says Sasuke is just like him, which is why he wants to fight him. The next thing to note is that Gaara refers to the voice in his head as both his mother and the demon god. That's because Gaara at this point in the series thinks that the sand protecting him was the demon god because his guardian told him that his mother never loved him, which was a lie Gaara's dad forced him to tell. He then saw his mother and the demon god as one and the same for some weird reason, which is why he says that the demon god will get stronger when he feeds it blood and then calls the demon god mother, when saying that he's sorry that he fed it bad tasting blood earlier. Again, this was clarified later on in the war when Gaara met his dad as an Edo. I say all this to say that Gaara's sand, which protects him due to his mother's will, not Shukaku's, or the sand armor he creates and maintains using his own chakra as confirmed by Kankuro, doesn't get stronger when he kills, because there's simply no merit or mechanic behind the idea. Gaara simply correlates hatred to power, which is why I thought that Sasuke was the strongest. Not because he saw him fight or sensed his power, but only due to the hatred he saw in his eyes, as he himself said. So the more hate he feels when he kills, he then attributes that to strength or getting stronger, which was later disproven by Naruto. That is the accurate interpretation of this statement, so if anyone makes the argument that Gaara who fought Sasuke was stronger than he was when he fought Lee simply because he killed the two father ninja, just know that it's an unquantifiable claim which misinterpreted what Gaara said without the proper context. With that out of the way, kicking off the fight at the exams, you see that Sasuke is able to damage Gaara's sand armor with a single punch, similar to what Lee did in the preliminaries. The difference here is that while Sasuke was able to put a small crack on Gaara's sand armor, Lee completely shattered it with a single punch, to the point where the entire shield started to come apart, which prompted Gaara to not just repair the shield, but add more sand to the already existing surface area, something he never did versus Sasuke. In fact, Sasuke went on to land 2 or so more kicks on Gaara, which didn't amount to the same amount of damage Weightless Lee did with one punch. And this kinda implies that Lee's attack potency, of course referring to his striking strength, is actually greater than Sasuke's. Unless you think that Sasuke was holding back for some reason, which of course is impossible to prove. The more logical conclusion is that Lee's just physically stronger, and that's without the gates. Speed-wise, Sasuke's speed in this fight was first compared to Lee's average speed with the gates by Guy, and then later compared to the speed of Weightless Lee, which would simply mean that Sasuke simply doesn't compare to the speed of Lee in any of the gates since they would naturally scale above Weightless Lee. Lee even said that it took him years to achieve that level of speed, but Sasuke attained it in just 1 month. But here's the catch. Lee also noted that maintaining that level of speed expends quite a lot of energy after seeing Sasuke huffing and puffing after just the second attack. By the way, Guy noted that Kakashi watched the fight between Gaara and Lee, so he has to know that hastily acquired taijutsu wouldn't work against Gaara, when even Lee couldn't defeat him. What this means is that while Sasuke is able to achieve speeds practically on the level of Weightless Lee, he isn't able to maintain that speed for long periods of time. He gets tired quickly as opposed to Lee, who was able to maintain that level of speed and even greater strain with 8 gates way longer than Sasuke could. This could mean that Sasuke simply lacks the stamina, or it could be because of what Guy said. hastily acquire taijutsu. Either way, what this proves is that Lee would still be above this version of Sasuke in strength and stamina even without the gates. They're likely relative in speed, but Lee can maintain his for longer. Add gates to it and Lee would also be faster. Now Sasuke does have the Sharingan, which does give him an advantage over Gaara that Lee never had. Lee even said it himself that he couldn't have launched an attack head-on at full speed because it's easy to counter, and he doesn't have the eyes to perceive and see through that counter, which is exactly what Sasuke was able to do with the Sharingan. So basically, speed increases momentum and force is equal to the change in momentum over the change in time. So if Lee was able to land an attack from a distance, the force of the attack would have been greater, thus doing more damage. Though this wasn't the case since he can't perceive counters like Sasuke did with the Sharingan. That brings us to this databook statement which says that Sasuke is Gaara's strongest opponent, which implies that Sasuke at this point is stronger than 5th Gates Lee, since that's the last version of Lee who fought Gaara. Now this wouldn't make sense since Weightless Lee did more damage to Gaara's sand armor in one punch than Sasuke did with multiple hits. So if we were to combine feats with statements, it is more likely that this statement is referring to Gaara's perception of Sasuke being the strongest due to his hatred, due to Sasuke being just like him, which I pointed out before. Gaara believes that Sasuke is the strongest because of the hatred he saw in his eyes. Because at this point, Gaara thinks that hatred is what determines strength. He said so when he interrupted Sasuke's training and Sasuke asked him why he wanted to fight him. He said that Sasuke has eyes that know real isolation, eyes that recognize it as the greatest pain in the world. Sasuke has eyes just like his, eyes seeking strength, spilling over with hatred and intent to kill. So Gaara links strength to hatred and confirms his existence by asserting that the more hatred you feel, the stronger you will be. That is why when Sasuke was losing to him in the forest, he told Sasuke that he's weak because his hatred is not enough, that his hatred will never match his, so he'll always be weaker. So Gaara believes that Sasuke is the strongest at this point because his worldview is that your strength is based on the level of hate you feel, which Naruto challenges later on in the forest, but we'll get to that part soon. There's also this narrative around Sasuke being the strongest even prior to the exams due to the fact that he's an Uchiha. In fact, most of the audience came to see Sasuke fight. This is also backed up when Lee challenged Sasuke because of his name. He wanted to see where his power stacked up against the Great Uchiha. There's also this one anime promotional material that says Sasuke arrives and now the confrontation between the best of the sand and leaves will begin, which people interpret to mean that Sasuke was in fact the strongest in the leaf. Now, aside from the fact that this is an anime promotional material, meaning that it's not canon material that should be facilitated in any real debate, this statement wouldn't even make sense since the Sasuke before this very moment lost to Weighted Lee, which would also mean that he would lose to Neji that Weightless Lee wasn't able to defeat. So what feats are they using to scale this version of Sasuke above those characters when the fight versus Gaara hasn't even happened yet? Then we get to the fight and Sasuke is being compared to Weightless Lee in speed and does less damage than Lee without the gates. So while everyone is hyping up Sasuke as the strongest because of his name or his hatred, as Gaara said, the story itself shows us that these people are wrong multiple times. Now, Sasuke being stronger than Lee can actually be argued if it's entirely based around the Chidori. The Chidori did actually make Gaara bleed, something 5th Gates Lee never did. The context missing here is that the Chidori is a piercing attack that also uses lightning release, something sand is weak to since earth is weak to lightning on the nature element scale. So the attack itself isn't just about strength but also the effect caused by the elemental advantage. So is the Chidori stronger than a 5th gate kick without the elemental effect it had on Gaara's sand? As in, would the Chidori do more damage than Lee if Gaara's defense was based on a different element? Maybe, but I say this so we can understand the intricacies behind being stronger and your attack being more effective. That was the winning factor between Lee and Sasuke. Guy and Kakashi confirmed that themselves. Sasuke had an ability that directly countered Gaara's sand, coupled with an eye that could perceive any counters while Lee didn't. However, versus Lee, would Sasuke be able to charge and land the attack? I highly doubt it. Now, Sasuke did win his fight versus Gaara because Gaara had a mental breakdown due to seeing blood for the first time to the point where he stopped his own transformation. So if we remove the premise of the invasion, Gaara would be eliminated since he lost consciousness and had to be carried away by Temari and Kankuro. If Gaara had transformed, then we could have used this transformed state against Sasuke, but he didn't, so he would be eliminated by the proctor. So Sasuke moves on to the next stage. Now per the match setup we got earlier in the tournament, Shino would be facing Kankuro and It would likely turn out the way it did in the forest when they fought, with the fight being a draw since they both disabled each other. They'd then be disqualified, so Temari would likely move on to the next stage. Now we have the fight between Naruto and Sasuke to decide who would fight Temari. We did some scaling earlier where we concluded that Naruto using the Nine Tails Cloak scales above Neji in speed, durability, and attack potency. The Sasuke that fought Gaara scales to weightless lead speed, but scales lower in attack potency as it relates to his striking strength, excluding the Chidori. There really weren't any durability feats since Sasuke didn't really get hit. He only got a few flesh wounds when he tried to attack Gaara's sand shield, whilst Lee tanked multiple hits from Gaara. Now we can't use this to say that Lee is more durable than Sasuke since he doesn't have any feats to compare to. Sasuke did get hit by a partial possession Gaara and survived, but he was severely weakened after taking the hit, so I wouldn't use that to scale him above Lee either. Let's just say that they're somewhat relative to, make it simple. Now the reason why the Lee scaling is important to Sasuke is because Lee couldn't defeat Neji, the same Neji who lost to Naruto. Now of course we don't know the details as to why Lee couldn't beat Neji. All we know is that he couldn't, and Lee considered him to be the strongest genin in the village. By the way, it couldn't be speed-wise since Guy himself stated that in terms of speed, Lee can't be surpassed, which implies that Lee is the fastest of the genins. That of course includes Neji. Mind you, this was only in reference to weightless Lee, not Lee using the gates. It's also implied that Neji has never seen Gates Lee before since he didn't know what the reverse lotus was and was surprised at Lee's monstrous speed. I mean, it was literally stated by Lee himself that this was a move he was keeping in reserve to be used against Neji in the Chunin exams. He never said this about weights, and Neji had no reaction to weightless Lee, which implies that Neji has seen or fought weightless Lee before. They could use Guy's statement to scale weightless Lee above Neji since he said that Lee was the fastest while he was weightless. Or you could also say that he was including Gates Lee in that statement since he has knowledge of Lee's speed in that form. What this does is give you some wiggle room to scale Neji to or above weightless Lee in speed. It is more likely that he does scale to weightless Lee in speed since if he didn't, Lee would have been able to blitz him before he could activate his rotation ability. So since we know that he wasn't able to beat Neji, it is highly likely that he wasn't fast enough to bypass his defenses like he did to Gaara. This is somewhat confirmed to be the case since Guy in reference to Gates Lee said that the answer to taking down Neji was high speed taijutsu combination, which implies that speed is still the winning factor against Neji, which also means that Lee wasn't fast enough before. We also deduced that Neji's rotation activation speed is greater than his actual movement speed per his reaction to Naruto on 2 occasions, but not by a lot. What this does is allow us to scale Kurama to Naruto to weightless Lee in speed, since Neji likely scaled to that version of Lee as well. That would also allow us to scale Kurama to Naruto to Sasuke in speed, since Sasuke scaled to weightless Lee per the feats and statements we discussed before. We also know that Naruto was able to bypass Neji's defense since Neji was visibly damaged by Naruto colliding with him, even though most of the force of the attack was deflected upon Naruto per Tenten statements. This surprised Tenten, who referred to Neji's defense as absolute earlier on in the fight, which means that it was never bypassed before, not even by Lee. This is of course the same Lee that did more damage to Gaara than Sasuke did outside of the Chidori. This means that Naruto amped by Kurama scales above weightless Lee in physical strength, while Sasuke scales below him per feats. This of course would also mean that Naruto amped by Kurama scales above Sasuke in physical strength. Now durability and stamina is a no-brainer for Naruto since a weaker version of Naruto that could barely stand after the fight versus Neji was able to tank multiple hits from a way stronger version of the Gaara that fought Sasuke. Naruto is also just flat out stated to have the best stamina on the team by multiple characters. Then you move to Naruto being able to maneuver and react to this version of Gaara, albeit this Gaara said that it was due to him underestimating Naruto. Though Naruto was later able to beat the brakes off a Shukaku clone Gaara using the multi-shadow clone jutsu after he remembered Aku's words and taps into his expansive reserves of chakra. And this was in fact Naruto's chakra since he later said that he used up all of his chakra to create the shadow clones just now, which prompts him to tap into Kurama's chakra and summon Gamabunta. Then after getting caught by Shukaku's sand once again, Naruto taps into even more of Kurama's chakra so powerful that it instantly blew away Shukaku's sand and ripped open Naruto's clothing. Now the question would be, in a fight versus Sasuke, would Naruto use that power? The answer is yes, I would say. Aside from Naruto literally using it in the fight versus Sasuke in the final valley, which you could argue that, the stakes are higher, so it doesn't mean that Naruto would use it in the Chunin exams. One could argue that since Naruto used it versus Neji, he would definitely use it against Sasuke, if it comes to it, since Naruto's entire motivation for taking the exams was to beat Sasuke. So there's no reason why Naruto would hold back against him, especially since he doesn't know the dangers of using the Nine-Tails chakra at this point in time, along with the fact that Naruto kinda knows how to consciously tap into the Nine-Tails power if he really wants to. However, Sasuke likely wouldn't use Chidori and Naruto since they aren't at the killing phase of their relationship just as yet. So, in character and in context of, the story at that point in time, Sasuke wouldn't use Chidori and Naruto has more chances of winning. But let's say that's not the case, and Sasuke uses all his powers and so does Naruto. Mind you, there aren't any rules in the final round of the exams. They allow you to do whatever you want, even kill your opponents. Now the proctor can step in before that happens, but that's purely up to his discretion. So Naruto is well within his rights to summon Gamabunta, as he was within his rights to use the chakra of the Nine-Tails, something everyone noticed. Now the real question is, would Gamabunta fight for Naruto since he didn't even care to fight Shukaku until Gamakichi told him to? The answer to that question is likely no. Though of course Naruto could stand to be a bit more strategic and maybe summon Gamabunta above Sasuke and use him to crush him because again, they are fighting to the death under this hypothetical. So that combined with Kurama's chakra that makes him faster than an Neji that has speeds comparable to a weightless Lee and strength that puts him above weightless Lee with Sasuke's scales below per feats, Naruto could also dodge Sasuke's Chidori with speeds he can achieve and not be stationary like Gaara was. And if Sasuke does manage to land a fatal blow to Naruto with Chidori, we all know what happens next, and this Sasuke hasn't had the awakening pills from the Sound Force, so he doesn't have CM2. So yeah, it's GG's for Sasuke. By the way, Sasuke only has one use left for Chidori since he can only use it twice in a day. If he does try to use it a third time, he would collapse as he did versus Gaara after pulling it out using the curse mark. So Naruto using Kurama's chakra is just faster, stronger, and more durable than Chunin exam Sasuke, and he also has a healing factor. Now I will say that Sasuke does have a better chance of winning if we ignore the characterization of these characters and the context surrounding their relationship at this point in the story. Because if Sasuke does use Chidori, it implies that he wants to kill Naruto. And from the perspective of Sasuke, if he does land the Chidori, Naruto will indeed die. Now under this perspective, Naruto still has a chance of winning since he has Gamabunta, and he's also able to summon more power from the Nine-Tails strong enough to dismiss the Sand Coffin of Shukaku. So Sasuke would need to land the Chidori before that happens, which of course is very possible. Now of course if you go back to using these characters, well, in character, this wouldn't happen since Sasuke wouldn't use Chidori, and Naruto being simply faster, stronger, and more durable based on his feats versus Neji and a stronger version of Gaara, just gives him the win 8 times out of 10. And I'm leaving those two possibilities because who wins a fight really depends on who the writer wants to win. Now Naruto would then go on to fight Temari with his monstrous stamina after being healed by the Nine-Tails chakra and thus to folder easily, thus winning the exams. That's it. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think this video made sense? If not, let me know in the comment section, of course. If you guys liked it, drop a like. If you're new, subscribe, and also consider becoming a member for more awesome content. If you guys want to support me, of course, becoming a member is one way, or you guys can join us on Patreon. Either way is fine, and I hope to see you guys there. But yeah, with that said, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.